All right, welcome in. Cube Show podcast, college football podcast comes to you on Sundays. Want to have a little bit of a different show today. We've had a couple of interviews recently. If you missed Seth McLaughlin, you need to go back and catch that. If you missed Demetrius at night, you need to go back and hear his story. Both incredible interviews, and appreciate the support on those. But wanted to talk a little bit about the future of college football today, where we're headed, where we're going. Not as much a report on what I think about what things are, what I'm hearing about things, but just if things are headed in this direction, what does it mean for the sport? I have some real concerns right now. I want to share those with you and just kind of get an idea of where things are headed and what this may look like. I want you guys in the comments to let us know what you like about where we're headed, what you don't like about where we're headed, maybe inherent fears that you have about the sport that we love so much now potentially looking extremely different in less than a year, possibly. So what's that going to look like? What's that going to be? We're going to dive into it. We're going to talk about it. As you guys know, each and every week, we're brought to you by Wickles Pickles, wickedly delicious. We keep them around the house. We absolutely love these things. You will snack on them. You will love them. Go to Wickles Pickles on Instagram. They've got different recipes. They've got different ways you can use them. They're incredible. They're the title sponsor of the show. WicklesPickles.com. They can drop ship them to you, so you can go have that done there. Also, WicklesPickles.com. They got the gear, the pickleball rackets, the apron, the hats, a lot of different stuff that you go check out. Support Wickles Pickles because they support us. Thank you very much. Also, my friends at Rowback, just in time for the tournament, got the new Auburn hoodie. Use promo code COLE20. You can save 20% off on any new Rowback gear. And this one coming in time just for March, if you're an Auburn fan and maybe a fan of the number one basketball team in the country. But I want to get into college football and kind of where we're headed. We've seen reports mainly from Ross Dellinger, Heather Dinich, a couple of others over the last 2 weeks that the SEC and the Big Ten have come together in a lot of different ways. Apparently, this memorandum that they basically forced all the other leagues to sign going into last year, something that we had not heard about up until a couple of weeks ago when Ross Dellinger reported that. We had him on our morning show talking about it, and he's like, yeah, that thing kind of slipped through the cracks, stayed under the radar. Not a lot of people talked about it, but essentially gave a lot of control over to the SEC and the Big Ten. Go a little different direction on this. I went and spoke to a group of Sanford students last week, and we talked about a lot of different things around how to get into, covering sports and being in the sports media, different things like that. And I was asked during that speech that if I was made the commissioner, czar, president, controller of college football for a day, what would I do first? And my answer, I don't think is going to make a lot of people happy. But I would get in my DeLorean and I'd fire that thing up and I'd go back to like 1994. And that's how I would realign things. Maybe even further back. Hell, I might go old Southwest Conference. But I think the geography of the sport is one of the things that got it to where it was and helped the popularity, because you fell in love with certain parts of it inside of your region. And then when your team went outside of the region, there was more interest there because that just didn't happen a whole lot. So when Alabama would go out to play UCLA, that was very interesting because you almost never saw it. Or when Auburn would go and play Maryland, you didn't see that a whole lot. So it was really cool and you want to know what that was going to be like. And then I think also, too, you had some of the smaller teams that were coming up that weren't just itching to constantly get into a better conference, that would build certain teams over time and all of a sudden have a chance to pull upsets. And there was a lot of pride, a lot of passion with that in certain areas. Also, I think the rivalries are what built the sport. I think Army, Navy, Iron Bowl, Ohio State, Michigan, Florida, Florida State, South Carolina, Clemson, Kentucky, Louisville, Arizona, Arizona State, and then some with Notre Dame, whether it's USC, Stanford. I think those games, Washington, Washington State, Oregon, Oregon State, Civil War, those are the games that we make fun of some of these trinkets that these teams play for every now and then, but that we have those. We have the old wooden bucket. We have Paul Bunyan's axe. We have the brass spittoon because there's meaning behind it. It means something. There was a point in time in which those two teams faced off against one another for probably a lot more reasons and hatred and spite than a football score or the outcome of a football game. Therefore, that inherent meaning just continued to grow. And then you have certain places where there weren't a lot of professional sports. in which college football would grow even further because that's where the majority of the passion was, and it didn't have to be split up with a Major League Baseball team or an NFL team or different things like that. So all of those things, I believe, are sort of what helped propel our sport to the popularity that it is today. Certainly some of the newer age things that have happened have been great. We'll talk about those in a minute. But that's sort of the baseline core, I believe, of how the popularity of this sport began to get to where it is. And we've tinkered with that and we've toyed with that a lot. And it hasn't hurt it yet. But one of the things that I continue to hear about where we're headed with this sport, and listen, there may be some of you out there that want AFC and NFC, Big Ten, SEC, and screw everybody else. And if you want that, that's great. If you want that, that's fine, because we're probably heading really close to that either way. And I think when we continue to go down that path, my inherent fears with that is some of the things that we have had intermittently over time are now going to be gone. We're not going to get some of the non-conference games. You're not going to get as many games where the little guy has a chance to come upset the big guy. And also, sidebar to that, those paycheck games are going away. Remember a couple of years ago after COVID when I called Sanford football games in the spring and did a podcast afterwards, and I had already talked to Martin Newton, the AD, and I had already talked to Chris Hatcher, the head coach, and I had already talked to some other FCS head coaches and ADs. And I said, FCS football should consider living in the spring. And the main reason I said that was not that the crowds were great at the games that I called or the games that I saw, not that more people paid attention to it, not that Auburn, Alabama, UAB, Georgia, Tennessee fans went to some of these games, which they never would have done in the fall because they're going to their games that they normally would go to. But I also began to notice how these non-conference games were starting to be pulled away. And there weren't as many games with Mercer and Sanford and ETSU and Jacksonville State and Citadel and games like that for Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Florida State, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Ohio State, so on and so forth. And with those dwindling, that means those chances of those teams financially keeping up are also going away. That is of major concern for me. And when I offered up to play in the spring, what I then offered was for your spring game to be an actual game in the fall early in the season. That'd be the only one that you played because you had your spring practice leading into that. And then you can get your $975,000, your $1.2 million, whatever that was at that point in time, and still find a way to pay the bills. I remember when we did a Georgia State game a long time ago for CSS, and the head coach at the time, they had just gone to play Alabama. I think it was 66-0, 68-0, something they lost. And he goes, yeah, but we had to do that. It was ugly. We got our brains beat in. He said, but you know what that did? I put lights at our practice fields. That's what we got. And so going to 9 games in the SEC, having an agreed upon non-conference scheduling model between the SEC and the Big Ten is only going to further push those away. Think about moving forward what these teams are going to have left of massive value. It's their inventory. We can talk about media rights and rights to the stadium and having concerts in the stadium and putting patches on the jersey or logos on the field. All of that stuff's great, but there's only so much of it out there. Let's be real. Let's be honest. There are only so many other things that we can pry out of this college football model to be able to gain more revenue. And now that the revenue is going to be shared here in a couple of months, we look at it from the standpoint of, okay, what else can we go get? There's just not that much left. So when you're a lower tier school as well, and you already don't have as much revenue, you have that taken away, it hurts that much more. The bigger schools are going to look at it and say, another way to get our money up, play more meaningful games more often. So what's the most valuable way to increase your own inventory? Play one another, mainly because you're not sharing it with anybody. So you add that game, and all of a sudden, somebody else got to pay for it. You have more valuable inventory across the board. Then you come up with agreement for another conference, this conference in lock and step, I guess, moving forward, and you agree to schedule them in the non-conference, and guess who you're not sharing the money with? Everyone else. It's just going between you two. You see, this all started when the BCS went away. And I had people that I trusted in college football talk to me about this revenue wheel that there was in collegiate athletics. And that, let's say that revenue wheel was $1 billion. We're using rough numbers here. And that 15, 20, 28, 22%, 18% of that went to the non-Power 5 schools, which was the reason that they were going to be grasping, holding on for dear life at whatever it was that was out there, because they never thought that 8, 10, 12, 20% of that billion they could ever go get on their own. Also, when you look at it from the opposite perspective, as we began to move forward, some of the bigger conferences started sitting back and saying, they don't have anything to do with who we claim as our national champion every year. They don't generate 90% of the ratings or the income or bring the eyeballs that we do. Therefore, why are we sharing this? And that mindset has got us to where we are today. Essentially, 2 conferences looking to take over control of a college football playoff, to have 4 teams from each conference get automatic bids into said playoff with an expanded playoff. Now, a couple of things are going to happen if this is where we end up going. Number one, first thing that's going to have to happen is there are not going to be conference championship games anymore. And y'all know, just like I do, how awesome those things have been. Now, without divisions, I've already think that we've seen some smaller examples of how relevant are these going to be moving forward. To take a similar model of where that game lies, and then to maybe go down and say, okay, 5 and 6, you get to play for a spot potentially in the playoff. Not even definitively in. Because if you had 4 Big Ten and you had 4 SEC and then 2 ACC and 2 Big 12, well, all of a sudden, that's 12 teams. And I just told you, we're going further here. We're not staying there. So you go to, let's say, 16, and all of a sudden you're going to have a G5 team that's going to get in, and the rest are going to be at large. Well, if you go take, let's say last year, whoever it was, Ole Miss and South Carolina, and you send them to Atlanta, they play again on that Saturday, and you're looking at it from the perspective of one of you is probably going to play your way out. However, to get that win against that team on that stage, you're telling me that team that gets that win and gets to 10 or 11 wins on the season with another top 10, top 12 win right there at the end of the year, that they're not going to be one of the 3 teams that's taken for an at-large? There's a good chance that they will. And the other conferences will do it as well. So that day could eventually become absolutely magnificent, because you got all these play-ins, and there's not, oh, they lost, but they're still the number 1 overall seed. Oh, they lost, they're still going to get a bye. Might end up being incredible. But on the flip side of that, how much does it take away from the regular season? And the regular season is something that I think is also an interesting conversation, because for years now we've heard people say regular season's going to get hit. Regular season's going to get hit. Regular season's going to get hit. And the numbers just keep going up. The numbers continue to skyrocket. And we look at it and we say, well, our sport's healthy. Sport's as healthy as it's ever been. Look at the ratings. Look at what they were. Look at the ratings that we're generating. And I get that, and I understand that. My biggest fear in this entire conversation comes with this. A lot of these folks want to do a lot of these things because of the current health of the sport. The current health of the sport is not going to be sustainable, because there have been advantages with the current state of the sport that has provided the current health of the sport. One of the main reasons that the sport is as healthy as it is right now is we have a 12-month news cycle, a 12-month news calendar within college football that allows us to talk about it almost every day. McElroy and I joke about it all the time. These last 3 off seasons have by far been the easiest / best off seasons we've ever had, because it's transfer portal, realignment, playoff talk, coaching changes. It's literally every single day something massive is happening. We got teams suing their own leagues. We got players suing for another year of eligibility. We got JUCO players suing to be able to get more eligibility. It's every single day. Now, what that has brought in is this new wave of eyeballs that normally, in the months that we're in right now, does not care about college football, other than what used to be that one Wednesday that was signing day, and then everybody tuned it back out. And you watch college basketball, or you watch NBA, or you watch baseball, spring training, getting ready for the regular season, or you just don't care about sports and you move on, and then college football turns on for a little bit of spring practice, and then you're getting ready to go again in August. It's not like that anymore. So we keep bringing all these eyeballs in February and March and April and May and June and July. And then the season's here, and everybody's excited for it. Everybody's ready for it. but we've added games. And it's not just those added games that have kept people tuned in, it's added games of meaning. So the regular season, when this 12-team playoff was constructed and people thought it would be a problem, I actually looked at that and said, well, hold on a second. We got 8 new teams that are going to get in. From mid-November on, how many teams are realistically going to be involved in games that at least one of them can play their way in or out in that regular season game? 20, 40, 12, 8? We don't know the number every year, but probably a lot more than what we had seen the previous years. So now moving ahead, and you hear more people talk about how this is going to hurt the regular season again, or will this help the regular season when we go to an extended playoff and we have the certain models that we've seen proposed that we're going to talk about. Of all those other times when the regular season was apparently going to be destroyed, this is the time that, and from some of the things that I have heard, I have now become the most concerned. Because if you are going to give me an invitational for the national championship between the SEC and the Big Ten, and then the SEC and the Big Ten are going to agree to play one another for their non-conference games earlier in the season, which by then, most likely, would remove some of the games like South Carolina, Clemson, like Kentucky, Louisville, like Florida, Florida State, like Georgia, Georgia Tech. I can't go for that. Just like Daryl Hall and John Oates said, I can't go for that. Nor do I want to. Because those rivalries regionally are what made the sport great. And they're what invoke more passion, and they're what people care about more. There's a reason if you turn on the local news every Saturday night around midnight after the Iron Bowl, somebody in a trailer park somewhere has either been punched, hit with a frying pan, or shot. It's the reality. Same thing for the Egg Bowl. It just means more. But you cannot force feed rivalries in big games just because they involve big names. Nobody wants to see Auburn rotate between Purdue, Maryland, Michigan, and Rutgers every year. Nothing against those teams. There's just no inherent meaning with those games. And with what we've done with Southeastern Conference divisions for such a long time, we have other games that already have that meaning, and we've lost a few of those. Auburn didn't play LSU this year. We have multiple games where we've talked about, does Alabama save the Tennessee game? Can they save the Auburn and the Tennessee game? You're telling me Alabama and LSU aren't going to play? Alabama, Mississippi State was a game that we had gotten used to for a long time. Ole Miss is not going to play Arkansas. Ole Miss is not going to play LSU. Are they going to be able to hold on to Mississippi State? Florida, hell, half their schedule are rivalry games. Whether it's Florida State, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, they're not going to play those games anymore just because we've agreed to be able to go and play the other ones. And now I'm not saying that they'll never play them again, because now we have the rotational rivalries or rotational scheduling system where you'll play them every 5 years at least, whatever that is. But my point is, the familiar foes are something that invokes passion. There's an inherent memory deep down inside of you of what Darren McFadden did to your team at one point, or what Jamal Lewis did to your team at one point. And you want to get them back for that. So therefore, when you go play that team, every time there's pain or there's real joy because you went out there and sacked Brody Croyle 12 times, or you went out there and took care of a team with a game-winning field goal that you were a 2-touchdown underdog in, and you'll never forget that moment. And that other side of that, they want to pay you back for that forever. A rotational schedule is not going to allow for those things to have similar meaning because you're going to have more time to forget. As soon as you finish that game, whether it's a win or a loss, you know next year we got a chance at you again, and we're coming at you one more time. So those are some of the things that I'm concerned about. I don't need a Big Ten SEC invitational in the playoff after they've already sprinkled random games in for 2 or 3 weeks in the preseason, if you will, before the SEC plays one another. 9-game SEC schedule, all for it. I love it. But to sit here and look at where we've gotten with conference realignment, we're not even used to that. That thing still doesn't even make sense in a lot of different ways. All right, guys, I've told you about Fanatics Live. If you want to get back into the hobby, collecting cards, whether it's football, basketball, baseball cards, even Disney, Pokemon, WWE just had a big release this past week over there at Pizza Pulls. They did like a massive break of WWE cards, had 72 autographs in it, just one break. And if you don't know what breaking cards is, it's where you buy in for a wrestler or a player or a team instead of spending $800, $1,200, $5,000 on one of these boxes of cards that are out. So you go to Fanatics Live right there, the app on your phone. You can click that. You get into it. You sign up on the link that we're sending you right now, and you're going to get a whole slew of little places right there that are breaking cards. You can go get a bunch of different things. Anything you're looking for. Top Series 1 is out. Topps Chrome Football is out. You got some cool autographs that are in there. They got some of the retro guys as well. You still got Bowman's Best U, Bowman U Sapphire. I'll be breaking those every Tuesday around noon on Pizza Pulls, where you can go to Fanatics Live and then go check them out. We're going to have a big one with Topps Chrome Football and maybe some Bowman U Sapphire this Tuesday at Pizza Pulls through Fanatics Live. Use this link right there. Sign up, get $25 for free. That'll get you a team in that break on Tuesday if you want to go get in there and get in with us. Listen, so Fanatics Live sent me a couple cases of college football cards recently. I should have opened them up for you guys again. I want to show you a couple that I've gotten. How about this dual autograph from Virginia Tech right there? This thing's numbered 15 out of 25. Bracial Tootin and Kyron Drones. That's pretty sweet. How about a little 35 out of 75 James Pierce auto for the Tennessee Volunteers going to go in the first round, or an Eric Singleton jersey patch auto transferring over to Auburn, dynamic wide receiver from Georgia Tech. How about the Gunslinger wanted poster, Brady Cook? That thing is to 39 out of 50 autographed on card, Brady Cook right there. And then I had to show you guys this one. I mean, this thing is just massive. Look at that beautiful thing. Notre Dame triple auto right there with Chris Mitchell, Jeremiah Love, and Riley Leonard. Jeremiah Love gives you the Go Irish script on there also. I mean, that thing you probably can't, it's not going to focus in on it really right there when I do that. That thing is gorgeous. I appreciate my friends at Fanatics Live sending those over. I was able to rip some, share some with the kids. And man, it's just cool to see it. It's cool to get back into it. And you can get back into it right there with Fanatics Live. And now we're going to push forward with an expanded playoff where we're jamming teams in, not necessarily throwing in the 12 best teams. And the easy out here is to sit back and say, we know good and well the Big Ten are going to have 4 of the 12 best teams every year. We know good and well the SEC are going to have 4 of the best teams every year. But when you even it all out, do we? The ACC has an up year. Big 12 has an up year. There's 2 or 3 group of 5 teams that maybe deserve a shot at it. I don't know. But what I do know is we spend a lot of time talking about the integrity of the game, and we can't allow sports gambling to do this, that, this, whatever it is, because integrity of the game. But to automatically say that teams are just going to get in because of who they are, or excuse me, the umbrella in which they play under, does that affect the integrity of the game, or at least that tournament? I think there's a small chance that it does. And I don't know how many people are going to continue to fall in love with it that way. And to be honest, to keep going where we're going, there's going to have to be more growth. There just is. So my fear in that comes that with all these eyeballs that we now have, and all these ratings that we have, and all the people that are all excited about it and all into it, why are they into it? Well, that news cycle that's brought them in has been great. If you're like me, nice is new. New house, nice. My wife would like to go down and buy an old house and renovate it and put new stairs in and do new railings and build a new patio. And I don't want to deal with that. Give me a new house. That's nice. New pair of shoes. Nice. Don't care how cool the old ones are. New car. I don't want a fixer-upper. Just give me a new car. That new car smell and everything works. That's nice to me. Some of you may be different. That's okay. But for most people, I think nice is new. What have we had in college football for the last 5 or 6 years, 4 or 5 years? Going into every season has been new. Very new. Transfer portal has changed rosters. The coaching turnover is greater than it's ever been. That changes outlooks and aspects and talking points of teams. Not to mention we've had scheduling differences, conference realignment, which has gotten us excited because this team's going there. Where's that team going to be? What are we going to do? The college football playoff has changed and expanded. So we've had all of these gigantic new shifts, including NIL in there somewhere, where every single year for 4, 5, 6 years, a lot of it's been brand new. There's going to come a point in time when it's not new anymore. And there's not these new aspects that everyone just wants to see how they work out or going to pay attention to because they think it's cool or they want to know what it's going to look like. There will be at some point in time a flattening out of things. And does the attention span hold? Does the attention span grow? Does the attention spike? Does the interest go up? We don't know the answer to these things, but my guess is probably going to be no. So where are we headed with the overall health of the sport? That's my biggest concern right now. I don't know the answer to it. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. But I'll say this, the regular season is going to have to seriously be talked about. If you're going to expand this playoff again and continue to have a conference championship game, to continue to push this thing out on the calendar, number one, is not going to work. And number two, you're going to continue to get lawsuits from players. And if there ever is a players union, which don't believe people that there is one now, and they tell you they're the president of it because there are not players unions currently. When we do get to that point, they're not going to allow for all these games. It's just not going to happen. Now, I don't think they'll ever be able to collectively bargain with players that are changing teams and conferences and leagues and in and out every 2-3 years, but that opportunity may lie there somewhere, somehow. So I guess in saying all of this is, I am worried about it. I am concerned about it because I love this sport. I love the SEC. I played football in the SEC. I call games on the SEC network. There are parts of where this is headed from an SEC and Big Ten perspective that make me a little bit nervous. My thought process has always been like Mark Rick said a long time ago. There's enough to go around. And I realize we've moved into not just big, we're not even big business territory anymore. We're in massive enterprise business now. And I guess if that's the way that it's going to be treated, you put people that run things that way accordingly in positions of power, and that's how they move forward with it. But a lot of those things that we fell in love with feel like they're being stripped away and feel like they're being kicked to the curb. It's no different when you look at the discussions around the NCAA tournament of more leagues wanting more automatic buys because they don't think that the Horizon League should get an automatic bid, or they don't think the Sun Belt should get an automatic bid, or they don't think the Ohio Valley Conference should get an automatic bid. We don't want that 24-2 team in there. We want our 17-18 team from a big league that played good teams all year in there. Do you want that? I don't know if I want big school 500 teams to be in the tournament just because they have name recognition. Doesn't feel like something I'm a massive fan of. I want you to comment and let me know where you think we're headed. Is it good? Is it bad? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Is it eventually going to be better? None of us know because we don't know exactly where we're going to land. One thing we do know is that if this leads to us having more control, more guardrails, more guidelines to how all of these things in college football that are frustrating at the moment operate, that could be a massive positive. And maybe that will be. And maybe that's what we need to get to. You know, they followed up with that when I spoke to those students of what would you tell the other leagues? If you could give the other leagues advice, what would you tell them? The non-Power 5. And I've said this before, but the first thing that I would do is I'd be coming up with an alternate plan really quick. I'd have one right there in my drawer right now. And all I would need was the 1 to 3 to 5 guys to be able to back it, and then we could go put it into place on our own. Because that number's being squeezed. And eventually it's going to be 0. Or, you know what? Maybe just for inclusion's sake, it'll stay at 1%. And are they going to be able to survive with that? 2%, 3% even? I think the answer is probably no. And the answer is that gap is going to widen so much further that it's not going to be an enjoyable process for him to even be involved. So I appreciate you being a part of the show. Like I said, comment, let us know what you think about where we're headed. I just wanted to address a couple of these things that are happening. The other part of it is spring football. And spring football, now we're seeing where spring games are going to go away. Matt Rule's talked about it. Now news comes out, USC is not going to have a spring game this year. We know what Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss did last year, but now y'all are starting to see that some of us knew what we were talking about when we told you why Ole Miss had their little spring circus. And it wasn't because Lane was trying to be cool, and it wasn't because Lane thought that was going to be more fun. Lane didn't want you to see his backups or even some of his starters that you just didn't know about. So this inherent fear of people knowing what we have and then coming to take it away has now forced us to take another thing away from the fans. And I get it. This isn't something that 100,000 people show up to all of them across. It's kind of have it or take it or leave it, whatever. I love spring games. I like to get a little peek into what things are going to be. And I've said before, I think there are takeaways from them. I think there are things you can learn. Hell, we do one for every spring game here on this podcast in the SEC. And I've seen sort of the NFL OTA model, something that's been pitched. The other thing that I think we need to be very careful with here is our development of this sport. The players, the systems, the schemes, the teams, if you will. We've already stripped away so much from a practice perspective. And it does show up on the field. Some of you guys might not see it, and it might not be as evident all the time. But the development of certain parts of teams are lacking. And there's no better way to know that or see that than to see how certain teams were impacted by injuries last year. Whether it was a guard at Georgia or a guard at Alabama or a defensive tackle at Notre Dame or somewhere. Notre Dame offset injuries better than anybody last year. They did the best job I've ever seen, maybe. Marcus Freeman and his staff did. But some of these injuries to one guy are now making team looks more different than they ever have before. So we've got to be careful with taking away more developmental time for college football players. Because we barely hit now. We barely get in pads now. We barely tackle now. You guys think tackling's where it should be? You think the technique and fundamental on offensive lines is where it should be? Absolutely not. We're spending less time in pads now than we ever have in this sport. And to begin to tinker with doing that less frequently is something that's going to be very dangerous. I go back to where things are heightened right now because of the way certain things have been happening. And because of roster movement, because of a lack of practice time, and then a lack of physical practice time, real practice time, if you will, that the development is being hampered faster than a lot of people even realize. So to go into one of the major developmental times in the spring and say, we're not going to remove some of that. And again, this is not just the spring games. I don't like that. I kind of get that, but I'm also seeing where some people, instead of a spring game, are going to have like a family day or whatever the hell. I don't even know what that means, but family and friends come. Like, what do you still practice? We've got to find better ways to better develop what our teams are going to look like to continue to let our product be great. There's no reason the product can't be better or look better or act better on a more consistent basis. And if we continue to strip away time in which that developmental process takes place, there's no way that we're going to get ahead of the developmental curve in a lot of spots in college football. So that's my little rant for today. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Go check out our friends over at Blue Delta Jeans. Blue Delta Jeans is the most comfortable denim that you will ever wear. I love my Blue Deltas. You love yours. Custom fit just for you. So you go to BlueDeltaJeans.com. You can do it digitally. Stop by the store over there in Oxford. See Nick and the guys. Tell them we sent you. Blue Delta Jeans are fantastic. I'm telling you. You want a pair of Blue Delta Jeans, you're never going to want another pair of jeans. Had them on last night. Love them. Go to BlueDeltaJeans.com today and see what they can do for you. All right, please subscribe. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else you want to listen. Go tune in. Go check it out. Please tell your friends about it. Subscribe if you're watching here on YouTube, and we'll be back next week.